Hey, what's up guys, aarava here, and welcome back to another episode of my F1 Manager 22 career mode here. If you guys did miss the previous one, which included 2 races in it, then be sure to go check that one out before you see this one. And this episode will also include the next 2 races, from Austria to the French Grand Prix. Last time out, it was the Canadian GP with some rain involved, and the British GP, which ended less than ideal after such a great Canadian Grand Prix with a double podium for our team. At the end of the British GP, our 2 drivers collided. Not any of their fault. You know, Gasly made a mistake and span, and unfortunately, Alonso was just unlucky to get caught up in that. So hoping we can bounce back from that and show some good pace around Austria, the place where we were so quick in Season 1. So I'm expecting some good form around the Red Bull Ring, and then we'll see how the French GP goes. Obviously, having Gasly, I want to do well with him at his home race. But off the back of that collision at Silverstone, we do have to manufacture some new front wings, and we'll probably have to go for an emergency build to get enough spares, basically, because we've only got a finite number of days until the Austrian GP. Obviously, the European portion of the season, the races are coming thick and fast, and it makes things a bit difficult when we do have to manufacture new parts. So kind of going with a kind of split approach by building a spare with a normal approach and then going for 2 emergency ones. It means we're not spending as much money, but we're still going to get enough front wings in time for the race, and then also have a spare eventually after the race weekend is done with that normal manufacture. But we're going straight into the Austrian GP weekend. Practice is done, and we simulate into Q3. It wasn't as great as qualifying as I'd hoped. Fernando Alonso P4 on the 2nd row. Gasly down in P7, behind a McLaren even of Lando Norris. But, you know, good that Alonso got ahead of at least one Ferrari. The 2 Red Bulls front row lockout. Sergio Perez on pole, which is surprising. And I say surprising because we did show a bit better pace in the practice simulations and quali. But I'm sure we can do something in the race, and the race itself is going to be pretty exciting because we had pretty much a whole wet race in front of us. You can see that blue line indicating almost kind of full wet conditions at the start, then definitely down to an intermediate period, then maybe bubbling to just about full wets, maybe before dipping down into very much intermediate territory again for the remainder of the race. Potentially maybe a last dash on dries. You can see as the blue line dips right to the bottom at the very end of the race. But my engineer's default started both my drivers on inters, even though that indication, that blue line, it would suggest full wet. So I was tempted by full wet tires. The millimeters of water would be high enough, but because my engineers decided to put me on inters default, I'm thinking they reckon it's not worth it, and you may as well just see it out on inters and negate an extra pit stop. So that's what we're going to do. Start in intermediates and basically just see how we go and kind of do the strategy on the fly, basically, because of those changeable levels of rain. So we go to 5 red lights to a very wet Austrian GP, and we are underway. Alonso making a decent enough start versus Carlos Sainz into turn 1. There are a couple of guys that are on full wet tyres. I think the 2 McLarens and one of, or maybe both the Red Bulls even, on full wets. Yeah, both Red Bulls have opted for full wets. The Ferraris and ourselves an Audi, we've chosen intermediate. So this is going to be a decisive decision. At the start of this race, I wasn't too bothered about what the pace was going to be versus the Red Bull cars and the McLarens behind us, because you can see also Norris has actually already jumped Gasly. So the full wets are maybe the quicker tyre potentially in this first part of the race. Millimeter water, 3.2 millimeters. So right now, inters is the best tyre, but you're going to see that rain actually increase a little bit as we go on through. But Alonso showing some good pace to get up into P2, split the 2 Red Bulls. Gasly has got back ahead of Norris, which is good to see, but you'll see in this whole race, Gasly, for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe set up confidence, I don't know, maybe just, you know, Alonso's better in the wet. I'm not sure about that. I would have to check the stats, but Gasly wasn't showing as much pace versus Alonso in this one. I had actually put Alonso on a 1 stop to go on to use 2 sets of inters and going quicker, and Gasly opted to plan to just do the whole race on Inters. But you'll see as we go on through this race, the flip-flopping of the weather basically meant that, as I said, I was doing the strategy actually on the fly and ignoring all the pre-planning I'd done, maybe looking at the weather screen ahead of the race. But Alonso doing well to pressurize, good pole sitter Sergio Perez to get ahead of Verstappen, the man who's won all the races for Red Bull so far in this season. Alonso pressurizing Sergio Perez now on lap 3. Gasly, you can see, still P6. Hamilton's now overtaking Norris, and Lewis was a little bit close for comfort to Gasly, so that was the first signs of, okay, he's struggling a little bit, don't really know what's going on with, similar sort of, pace settings for the fuel, the pushing, ERS management as well. So just, bog standard, he just did not have the same pace as Fernando, who was sticking to the back of the Red Bull car, and Gasly is now going to be defending Hamilton. And ahead, Alonso, he's got Sainz for company now. Lap 5, Perez is pulling away, and now Verstappen has just overtaken Sainz like it was nothing. Norris just overtook Gasly, Leclerc, Hamilton, because, look at the right-hand side, water 4.75. So technically now, it's time for full wets. So all of us at Inters are struggling. It's now 1-2 for Red Bull. Perez was already 5 seconds up the road now. But I wasn't panicked because they have to make a whole pit stop. Whereas we know we can go minimum at least about lap 40 into this race on Inters. And then we'll see what the tyre levels are saying, basically. So at this stage, lap 9, already the water is coming down. Perez is pitting. Verstappen's already pit. Verstappen's done P14. So just like that, Norris stays out. He's in the lead now for McLaren. But in a lap's time when he comes in, Alonso will lead just ahead of Sainz. It'll then be Leclerc, because Ricciardo in P4 right now. Great job for McLaren right now, but he's also on full wet. So the running order would be Alonso, Sainz, Leclerc, Hamilton, Gasly. Hamilton is on Inters, I believe, along with us. So Gasly just completely has legitimately just not had the pace and has actually dropped behind on the Silver Arrows, the team that I thought we saw the back of, basically. I did push him a bit harder to go flat out attack to try and get a bit more, pace out of him. He overtook Hamilton, which was good. So I don't know, maybe he just needed a bit more encouragement of pushing hard, a bit more flat out, a bit more fuel usage, maybe an aggressive micromanagement of the ERS, which I was trying to do with the harvesting into turn 1 and also turn 3, and then deploying an overtake mode as well to try and close up to Ricciardo and Leclerc. Leclerc right now being held up a little bit by Ricciardo. So Gasly is now going to be in the frame to overtake the Ferrari, nearly 3 abreast into that right-hander on lap 10. So that was pretty close. I thought we could maybe done that. We're going to hope that Gasly can get down the inside here. Ricciardo's really slow right now on those full wets. The Red Bulls, they firmed it. They pit. The McLarens, they're being too stubborn. They're trying to go longer on full wets, and it's just basically not working for them, and they're ruining their entire race. But Ricciardo's kind of annoying us, because you can see we're getting past Leclerc here with Gasly, but we're being boxed in by Ricciardo. Meanwhile, Alonso fast up the Grand Prix, 1.2 ahead of Norris now, who's holding up Sainz. So in that way, the McLaren's helping us, at least with Alonso. Ricciardo then moves to the right, so I was really hoping Gasly could make that double dive. It's going to be three wide again into this turn. Ricciardo somehow still manages to stay ahead of us, so we go for overtake mode. We're pushing on fuel, we're full out attack. At this point, frustrated that we can't get Gasly past Leclerc and even Ricciardo, and this is hurting us because we're now 5 seconds behind Norris, 7 seconds, and eventually Gasly makes an insane move there in the middle of the two of them to thread the needle to get into P5. Leclerc got the overtake though as well, so it wasn't quite a double pass, but Gasly being committed, and now down the inside of Leclerc, it's going to be very, very tight. And remember, these all in intermediate conditions, so very impressive from the both of them to keep this going, basically. But the Ferrari just edges us. But I do believe we are the quicker car around this circuit versus Ferrari. Alonso showing that 2 seconds ahead of Sainz Alonso dominating. We cut to lap 19, many laps later in this first stint. Alonso P1, 3 seconds now ahead of Sainz. Leclerc, he's gone away. He's pushed away. Hamilton's overtaken us, and now disaster because Gasly makes a mistake. So Gasly not only couldn't get Leclerc, he actually got re-overtaken by Hamilton and then made this mistake and lost so many positions. So it's a day to forget for Pierre Gasly here in this race. Long race to go, about 50 laps still in this one, but he's down to P11 now, so it's a long day for the Frenchman in this office. The you can see the water is kind of fluctuating. It went down to 2 millimeters at one point, then went right back up to 4 millimeters. So at this point, lap 21, I think it's time to start pitting in for a set of wet tyres, because it is that deceivingly, that chart, I didn't believe that this was going to be a full wet period. But the millimeters of water don't lie. It's full wet conditions. And you can see Sainz now on that bottom right of the map. He's come in for full wets. So a couple of people are thinking about full wets. The Ferraris are, for sure. So I'm going to pit in Gasly for full wets because he's got nothing to lose. He may as well come in and go to what the track is saying. But with Alonso, I wanted to stay out because I had a hunch that it wouldn't bother him too much. He did so well in the first stint to see it out on inters. So we just played it calm with him. So now we've got 6.9 on Leclerc. Obviously, when he pits, it's going to be even more than that. And Alonso was showing great pace, actually, on inters in a situation which was just about getting to full wets. But Gasly's on the full wets. You can see a load of people in. Bottas, the two McLarens, but actually both AlphaTauris of Bottas and Albon are in. So Gasly now, it's about all-out attack on the full wets to try and bridge the gap, try and overtake some people. Namely, it's going to be Ocon and Vettel to catch up to because there's a much bigger gap than to Sainz. So at this stage, I think we're not going to be able to get Gasly ahead of a Ferrari, which is annoying because even though Alonso's winning, if the Ferraris are able to finish in decent points, both of them, they'll negate all the points we're scoring, basically. 25 points, is not a lot if you add up, 10 points and 8 points and, from two Ferraris, for example. So that was my kind of only annoying thing here. But lap 29, Alonso's bossing this, really bossing this. And it helps that Hamilton, another man who stayed out on inters with us, he span. He was in P2. He span. And so gave us even more time in hand. So Alonso, about halfway through this race, 12.5 ahead of Hamilton in P2. Perez and Verstappen, P3 and 4. Ironically, they didn't come in for full wets. They've stayed out on inters. So kind of a reverse of roles there. Red Bull messed it up at the start of the race. Ferrari maybe messed it up in this second part of the race because they came onto full wets when they could have really stayed out on inters. But obviously my justification for bringing Gasly in was it couldn't get any worse if we pit him onto full wets and try and match the Ferraris. Sainz now is coming in. I think he's coming in for intermediates. So we're going to be following him through eventually, I would say. This whole time Alonso on the same set of inters, 74% tyre wear. He's doing amazing. I know inters go a while, but Alonso was doing insane in terms of keeping those tyres. We just had to leave him on standard, and we were even saving fuel. It was a very simple race to manage for Alonso's side of things. For Gasly, bit of desperation. I was trying different things, pushing him flat out, looking at the last laps to see what the pace was like and seeing if he could stay out on full wets, but it was very clear and apparent then on the next lap when he said a 1:14 compared to 1:12 of Ferrari, it was time to come in for intermediates once again. In hindsight, we maybe should have left Gasly out there on inters because he would have jumped the Ferraris, but obviously I can say that now, having done the race and this being a post-com. But at the time, desperation came in and I was like, what do I do? I want to get him ahead. And it just didn't work, basically, in terms of closing up the gap with full wet. So he's got 17 seconds to Ferrari, so he's gonna have to firm P10. And that kind of led to more desperation later in the race, you'll see. But here we have a collision between the McLaren and the Williams. The McLarens, they were doing so well at the start of the race. Bit of a shame for them to be a lot further down now, P12 and 14 from what was at one point P1 and P4. But just shows that, playing the long game sometimes on this game with the weather plays out rather than like in real life where you just kind of be on the right tar at the right time. This is about kind of eking it out and seeing the long picture of it's going to be intermediate soon, so they've really fluffed it. Obviously, we did the same thing because we pit onto full wets with Gasly when we should have gone to Inter. So also at the same time, whilst I'm bossing him with Alonso, we learnt the same lesson with Gasly that McLaren were learning and Ferrari and Red Bull were learning, basically. So at this stage, lap 56, all kind of calm, really. Gasly's overtaken both Alpine cars to get to P8, but Ferrari P6 and 7, it's going to mean the 25 points from Alonso is going to mean a lot less, but it's still an amazing performance. Fernando Alonso showing his class right now. 12.9 ahead of Hamilton, who's ahead of the Red Bull car, so that's going to be good for us in terms of outscoring Red Bull in a decent margin, and just kind of having a good feel factor of, you know, being in such a lofty position in P1. Don't think we've ever had this kind of massive gap in P1 before. Now, this is where desperation kicked in. You'll just notice I pit Gasly in for dries, because look at the water. It went down to nearly 1 millimeter, 1.1 millimeters, and I was hoping it would stay at that for the whole race. It did not. It started raining more. It did dip down below 1 millimeter, but then it went very quickly up past 1 millimeter. Gasly was already P17. In hindsight, should have known he wasn't going to catch anyone anyway. So in the end of it, it was a bit of a useless thing. So he kind of, you know, Gasly 0 points to 1 point. What's it going to matter? But Fernando Alonso wins the Austrian Grand Prix. It's his 3rd race win of this season. That is awesome, and in such a dominating fashion. This was a real satisfying win. This was a really, really well-managed win. And kudos to Alonso for making it easy for me, because literally he did that whole race on the same set of tyres. Didn't have to change anything despite all the weather changes. You know, the game telling me it's now time for wet tyres, it's time for dries. He just bossed it. So, unfortunately, though, like I said, with Ferrari, both cars in the points, they still outscored us by 2 points. So, what could have been, if I didn't pick Gasly for the full wets, we could have maybe got one of the Ferraris and we could have been gaining on Ferrari rather than losing 2 points to them. But the fact we only lost 2 points to Ferrari and we're still very much within range of them in the Constructors is very promising. That's what I want to continue doing, and clearly we still need a few more upgrades, which are coming onto the car eventually. It just takes a bit of time, obviously, for the ones we made. I think we made a new front wing, and we've got an underfloor on the way. The front wing, I think, may come in just in time for this next race of the French GP. The underfloor is going to take a little bit longer, but we're going to need those upgrades. But we had this regulation change vote at the start of the episode. You may have seen it in the background whilst I was talking about things. I voted against double points. F1, the teams, they've just voted for it. So next season, we have double points at Abu Dhabi. Is it 2014 again? Very odd decision from the AI teams, but there you go. I guess to add a bit of spice, kind of fake spice, but there we go. But you can see there, our new front wing has been made, our 3rd one of the season. So we're going to go for an emergency manufacture of 2, because we've got cash to burn to make these emergency parts, and I want the upgrades to come to this car as quick as possible, because otherwise we will slip away and Ferrari will out-upgrade us. So we need to be on the ball and just kind of using the money when we can to make the emergency manufacturers. And to be fair, in terms of our HQ facilities, we don't have a lot right now to upgrade, in my opinion, at this stage of this career. So we can afford to use that money, basically. But we go ahead and add some new projects then, because also our research gets done. So we can add a new research project. Now, I decided to research side pods just because I don't feel side pods get a lot of love on the game. They only affect top speed and acceleration and engine cooling. But, you know, I think top speed's underrated. On this game, I think you do need a lot of straight line speed to make sure they power past AI. So went for research on the side pods. And then I went for a new design on a chassis. So the underfloor will get done in 12 days. And we just did a new chassis upgrade. And we're now going on towards the French Grand Prix. Of course, like I said, Gasly's home race. So after a very annoying Austrian GP, and obviously even, you know, the Silverstone race, how that went, I really wanted to give Gasly a good result, and I was hoping he would just be good anyway because it's his home race. And in Q3, that was apparent because he qualified P4. Alonso was the man who was down the order in P6. Again, not as good as I thought we would be in quali, but clearly you're seeing in these races we do have genuine race pace there if we're able to nail the strategy and make sure that, you know, we're keeping the tyres in check and we've got like a pre-plan of either 2-stop or 1-stop. And that's exactly what I thought to do here. Now, for once, I'm making Alonso go on the 1-stop, and I'm making Gasly go on the 2-stop. Because how many times we've seen Alonso get a sneak podium, even get a win because of a 2-stop and being aggressive. So this time I thought, Gasly, it's your turn. You do the 2-stop. Alonso, let's see how your tyre saving is, because it was amazing at Austria. So let's put that to the test here around Paul Ricard. So here we go to 5 red lights, the second race of the episode, and we're underway. Gasly P4, Alonso bit slow off the mark, you know, down to P7 as McLaren and, you know, the Mercedes, they're definitely improving and nipping at the heels a little bit, but Alonso gets back up to P6. Now looking at Carlos Sainz to get to P5. Gasly a bit slow, only P4 still, but there is a bit of space there for him to dive bomb, and he does go for the dive bomb. Very aggressive driving there from the home favourite. And he gets up into P3, just about. He's still side by side, has to finish off the move with Leclerc. And then it's the 2 Red Bulls once again looking quick, but bit of difference here. Perez on hard tyres. I think that was hards. So we need to get past Perez, because Perez is going long in this race. I need to get past him and then also have a go at Verstappen, because even Verstappen, he was on mediums. I reckon Verstappen's doing a 1-stop, so we need to get past both these guys and just try and pull away and push flat out, basically, which is the plan. The game plan is to push flat out on the first set of mediums, then push semi-aggressively on the hards, then kind of go okay on the next set of mediums to the end of the race, and that should get us through and hopefully fighting for a win by the end of this thing for Gasly. So Gasly, the Frenchman, leads his home race in P1. Alonso's up to P4, so Alonso's ahead of both Ferraris. So Ferrari not showing too much race pace right now, and we're going to try now attack the Red Bulls with Alonso, and Alonso does get up into P2, lap 4, didn't even take that long. So now, Gasly 2.3 ahead of P2. Right now, Verstappen's coming back at Alonso, but basically, if I can get Alonso fully ahead of them, I'm going to try what I did in Baku, and I'm going to back everyone up by clicking the hold-up cars behind, saving fuel, saving tyres, and trying to defend, and basically giving Gasly an artificial lead to then bolster his 2-stop, basically. And it could definitely work, because Alonso's got the pace there with deploy to get ahead of Verstappen. And then we go to, you're about to see, hold back cars behind. We go to low fuel. We go on kind of normal tire right now, but I actually go to light and try and, you know, flirt with that and really hold up these guys and just try and game it a little bit in terms of trying to get Gasly a bigger lead. And already, you know, he's gained 1 second. He's now from 2.5 to 3.6 now is the gap. Alonso continues to stay ahead. I crucially was remembering every time he was about to be overtaken to hold back the cars behind to make sure we don't get tripped over by our own settings, and then we're going to try and re-overtake Verstappen, and we do that for so long that on lap 9, look at the train and the gaggle of cars behind me, and there's now a 7.7 gap to Gasly. So Alonso, we are making him the best teammate in the world right now, fighting like an absolute animal and a lion to stay ahead of these guys and back them all up in Sector 3. The gap's going to go to like 8 seconds now, 9 seconds by lap 10. It's ridiculous. At this point, I was feeling very confident about what we could do here with Gasly and even Alonso. Alonso is on the same strategy as Verstappen. Perez and I think Leclerc are on hard tyres, so they're on the same strategy of 1-stop, but they're just doing it the other way around. And Alonso's showing good pace. He's got good tyre wear because of that backing up as well. So I wasn't too worried about Alonso either. I thought, oh, we could probably get Alonso on a podium and get a double podium, maybe. Dare I say it, I want to, I don't know. At this stage, the Red Bulls do overtake us, but I think that's because they're pushing a bit harder, and we go down to P4, which is fine, because we still have plenty of time in this race. It's only 10 laps gone, and we've already done so much in it. But now Gasly's 10.9 ahead. At this point, I was finding it hard to get Alonso fully ahead of both Red Bulls. We're in the middle of them right now, but I can sense that maybe this is the time now to deploy with Gasly, push, and try and extend the gap just by him having some good pace on those tyres, and then pitting in soon as Alonso loses P3 down to P4. So now Alonso, I'm unable to do as much as I could before at holding the Red Bulls up. So this was the time to push Gasly, set some purples, and come in pretty soon for that first of 2 stops onto the hard tyres. But look at the kind of gaggle of the 2 Ferraris and the Red Bulls. That's all my work, basically. They wouldn't all be this close, I don't think, if it wasn't for my backing up. And the deploy was working really well in Sector 3 here. Alonso gets 1 Red Bull, just about 3 wide. Into that right-hander, gets squeezed out. So a bit frustrating here that now the Red Bulls are the ones holding us up. But we do come in then, lap 14 onto hards for Gasly, and the damage is done. 12.1 ahead of everyone. That is sensational stuff there for him. So that's going to work out really well, unless we hit some traffic, which definitely is a possibility. So that's the only thing that could maybe undo us in this race, is Gasly hitting too much traffic, as Alonso now gets attacked by the Ferraris and is losing a little bit of pace now on these mediums, and we're unable to maybe keep up as best as I thought we could. But it's a long-term game, even though, you know, Alonso may be losing a bit of pace here. We're going to stick in the DRS and, to be fair, maybe even re-overtake the Ferrari here and still be very much behind this side-by-side battle between the 2 Red Bull cars of Perez and Verstappen. So all of this fighting also is going to help out Gasly, who obviously is now on hards, looking to make the most of those hards. I'm going to go on low fuel, though. Oh, well, I was on low fuel, try and save him a bit. But then we hit a bit of traffic here. You can see the Alpine of Vettel, Ricciardo, Hamilton, Ocon as well up ahead. So this was the traffic I was talking about that could hurt the 2-stop strategy for Gasly. So we really need to get past these guys as quick as possible. That proved to be a bit difficult. Vettel and the Alpine cars showing a decent amount of pace in a straight line, which was hard to try and break. Eventually, we will get through 3 laps later through all of them, basically, because you can see ahead now Ocon v Hamilton. We've already got past Vettel and Ricciardo now with Gasly, and ahead of Hamilton and Ocon is a mountain of clean air of 7 seconds in comparison to all this dirty air we've had. So this was crucial to get past, make the double overtake, 3 wide down the straight, Gasly up into P9, and now in clean air to really use these hard tyres, use that gap, and try and make the most of it, because of course we're making a second pit stop. Yellow flags in Sector 2. Don't think that's going to be for anything just yet at the moment, but as it stands, these guys are still going. We're all still going at the top there on those mediums. So this is the time for Gasly to gain, 6.4, already showing good pace on these hards in comparison to Bottas there. And eventually, lap 30, Gasly up to P3, Alonso, Verstappen, and Sainz of pit. Verstappen P5, Alonso P6, Sainz P7. So Gasly's ahead of them by about, it's the intervals 4 to Russell and then 8. So Gasly's maintained about a 12-second gap to Verstappen, which is the same gap we had as we came into the pit. So even with that traffic, wasn't too bad. Perez pits now, so we're P2. Leclerc's still going on. Remember, Perez and Leclerc, they start on the hard, so they're going longer. But then this VSC comes out. Now, this VSC is actually frustrating because we decide to come in under it, because you definitely should, because it's a free, well, not a free, complete free pit stop, but you're going to get a quicker pit stop under a VSC because everyone's going to the same delta time. Unfortunately, that allowed Leclerc to make a cheap pit stop, and he is going to end up being a lot closer to us than initially thought, basically. This was why the VSC was called out. A collision in the last corner, I think that was, between the Haas and the Williams. So Leclerc and Gasly are coming into the pits then under this virtual safety car. And so it's going to mean Verstappen takes the lead, not surprising, but Leclerc comes out in P2. Now, really, he should have come out around P6 where Perez was. So Leclerc has gained a lot of time. And also, that pit stop, I don't know, the timing of the virtual safety car, it's a little bit frustrating because maybe if it was a bit later, maybe we could have pushed even harder on mediums, because we have a lot of laps now on the mediums to go for Gasly, who's in P4 behind Alonso, but the race is still there to be won. We're only about 2 to 4 seconds behind P1 of Verstappen, and we're on fresh medium tyres. So the race is there to be won, maybe, with Gasly. Alonso's also there in P3, so he can maybe do some work. But now Leclerc, unfortunately, Leclerc's managed to be there in P2, also on a fresh set of mediums. So Leclerc, going long on hards and pitting under a virtual safety car, has meant he's had the same pace and the same race time as us doing a 2-stop even though we were 12 seconds ahead, that 12 seconds got eroded by the pit stop and the fact the virtual safety car also gained Leclerc a bit of time there. So, a bit frustrating in that regard because Leclerc now is in the middle of this fight and could also easily win this race now. I think it's going to be between Gasly and Leclerc, and then there's going to be Alonso and Verstappen for potentially P3. Leclerc is susceptible maybe to Alonso, but I need to try and get Gasly ahead of Alonso, to be honest, to be the man charging on the fresh medium tyres. So there is going to be a point where we do swap them around, and Gasly's now P3 now, going for the attack on Leclerc. Plenty of laps to go in this, and both of us, well, we kind of have to fight each other, but at the same time not lose too much time to the Red Bull, because if he gets away, then that's just our fault, basically. So we get ahead of Leclerc, and now I'm hoping we can just try and chase after Verstappen, close him down, and get that P1, and then control it from there, basically. At least that was the game plan, basically. And things were going to plan, because on the next lap, Gasly overtaking Verstappen for P1, and again, using the kind of strategy of harvesting to this left-hander and the right, then deploying and going ahead. But also at the same time now, you can see on the bottom right there, I wanted to try and back up these two into Alonso and help Alonso out in the same way Alonso helped Gasly out in the first stint. I thought it would be only right to do that and try and get him closer, and Alonso did get closer. He's within 1 second now, so Alonso in the kind of top 4 fight, Leclerc and Verstappen moving about and kind of wrestling each other, but then Gasly makes a mistake. He makes a mistake, and that might be our race win done because of that mistake. Gasly down to P4, and he's got it all to do now. He's got to catch back up to Alonso 3.2. So now I'm going to try and attack these guys with Alonso to slow them up, to try and get Gasly back into the fight. Thankfully, he does catch back up, such as the pace in the medium tyres, and we swap him back ahead. He's in P3 now, but now it's, can Gasly just get back to P1 by the end of the race, because time's ticking, the laps are tumbling. And on that same lap that we got Gasly back up into P3, goes for a kamikaze dive in Sector 3 to get ahead of Verstappen. He's in P2 now. Now it's him versus Leclerc. And at that point when he made that move out of nowhere, I kind of got the feeling that Verstappen is kind of done, and he may not get into this unless Leclerc holds us up, and that straight line speed of the Red Bull is going to pay out. But we're looking to stay underneath the rear wing of Leclerc, harvesting through all these corners, and then looking to deploy on the next straight to get ahead of the Ferrari and get into P1, lap 46. So we've only got, what, like 7 laps left. We're into P1 again of the French GP, having to do it a second time because of Gasly's lock-up and error earlier. But it's going to be tough. The Ferrari's quick. He's going side by side with us. We just stay ahead. But by lap 48, Leclerc is side by side with us, and Gasly is struggling a little bit just to kind of keep him at bay. Leclerc gets back ahead. Now Verstappen's in the mixer again. Sorry, not even Verstappen, sorry. Perez is in the mixer. Verstappen did fall off a cliff. He's down to P5 behind Alonso. So Alonso remains in P4, but the Red Bulls have swapped. The Red Bull that was behind Alonso is now ahead, and vice versa. Perez is now the Red Bull in the middle of the fight then in P2. Remember, Perez was on the same strategy as Leclerc, hard to medium. So Verstappen being on the hards, he's fallen away. Now it's all 3 medium tyre runners here at the end of the race, and these two are side by side, lap 49. The laps are coming thick and fast, and I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm kind of worried now. I think the race win may be slipping away from our fingers here. These two having a ding-dong battle ahead of us. We are going to try and overtake Perez. Second last lap of the Grand Prix. Push him ahead. The tyres are in a very questionable state, but Gasly makes a great dive bomb to get up into P2, or so I thought. Perez comes back with the straight line speed, and so Gasly into the last lap of the race is in P3. A lot of traffic with lapped cars, but it looks like Leclerc's gone on away. Gasly making the move on the double right-hander into the main straight, deploying to solidify P2, but we're gaining to P1. Last lap of the French Grand Prix. Will it be French victory for us today with Gasly, or will Leclerc secure his and Ferrari's first ever win of the season? I think it might be Ferrari, unless Gasly can make an insane dive bomb right at the end here, like he did versus Verstappen earlier. Don't think so. In the end of it, it's going to be Leclerc who wins this race, wins his first race, Ferrari's first race. To be fair, maybe at some point it was due. It was quite surprising that it's taken, you know, this many rounds for Ferrari to even get a race win. Gasly P2, Alonso P5 as he fell away with pace and just stays ahead of Sainz. What could have been? What could have been? Maybe we overplayed it a little bit with the backing up and stuff. Maybe, I don't know, I think the VSC did hurt us a bit in that whole situation as well. What could have been? It could have been back-to-back victories, I feel, but solid podium for Gasly after 2 tough races. Alonso did the best he could on that one stop, kind of showing that actually Gasly is a lot better than Alonso on the 1 stops, and Alonso's better at the 2 stops, I think. So from now on, I think we'll swap them back around, and Alonso will be the one doing the extra stops, maybe, if it's possible. But again, Ferrari gain points on this. They gain, how many is that? They gain 5 points on this. So Ferrari edging ahead, but we're still within range. We just need 1 or 2 races where we both outscore them, get both of them ahead. That's the problem. Right now, we're getting one driver a win or a top podium, like 2nd place, and the other one's down in P4, 5, 6, or Gasly, in Gasly's terms, Austria, way down the order. So that's the thing we need to try and solve and get both of them there. But really, really solid episode. Very, very fun 2 races at Red Bull Ring and at the French Grand Prix. If you guys did enjoy it, hit the like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you're around here, then do get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.